Dr. Reza Keshavarz. Is that correct?
Yes, Nick, that's correct.
I got it. All right. Is a research scientist and extension specialist at the Western Colorado Research Center in Fruita. Reza has a Ph.D. in agronomy and 15 years of experience in the field of sustainable agriculture and crop production. Before joining CSU in October 2017, he was a postdoc research associate at Montana State University and a research fellow at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, enhancing viability of cropping systems in Western Colorado while reducing their environmental impacts are Reza's two major research goals. Reza currently has projects on conservation tillage, multi-purpose cover cropping, enhanced nutrient management, new and alternative crops for the region, intensification and diversification of cropping systems, and intercropping strategies for improving forage production systems. He's not busy at all, folks. So with that, we'll hand it over to Dr. Keshavarz and let him talk about the research that the Colorado Corn Administrative Committee helped fund in this last year. Dr. Reza, or Dr. Keshavarz, it's all yours.
Thanks, Nick, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. It's great to be with you today and talk about the project me and my colleagues started 3 years ago with the fund we received from Colorado Corn. Before starting, Nick, can you see my screen now?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
And you can hear me well? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so the title of the project is actually the entire objective of this project was to develop no-till management for corn production under furrow irrigation in Western Colorado. So as a background, in Western Colorado, over, I would say 100% of the corn crops are produced with conventional till, mostly mower plow. And all of us know that this type of tillage is, first of all, very time consuming, is expensive. It needs a lot of fuel, labor. It has also a lot of machinery and equipment costs. Also, mower plow over time can reduce soil quality and cause soil degradation, especially loss of soil organic carbon. And also it's not very environmentally friendly because it emits a lot of greenhouse gases. The main reason for extensive tillage in Western slope is the furrow irrigation system. Almost all farms, I would say over 90% of the corn crops in Western slope are produced with furrow irrigation. So, and because of furrow irrigation, farmers believe that heavy residue on soil surface can create challenge for irrigation. Therefore, they do whatever they can do to create a soil surface that is free of any residue in order to not having any problem with furrow irrigation. So many farmers bale the residue, some of them graze them, and some of them actually burn them. And after these operations, they actually start plowing and prepare the field for corn production. So we know that actually no-till management actually can offer many benefits, including agronomic, economic, and soil health benefits. But most of the no-till operations for corn production is either conducted in rain-fed systems, such as US Midwest, or in fields that have a sprinkler irrigation. Doing no-till in furrow irrigation can be challenging, as we discussed about it. And farmers in Western Colorado specifically hold the perception that they cannot do no-till in furrow irrigation. So there is lack of research and data to compare how different tillage system works under furrow irrigation. So because of that, we started 2 projects 3 years ago with the grant we received from Colorado Corn. In study number 1, we compared corn yield, economy of the production, and soil quality among 4 tillage systems that range in intensity of the soil disturbance. I will talk about the details later. And also in the second study, we'll look at how different residue management system interact with tillage method in terms of corn yield and production. So in study 1, actually, we had a strip trial and side-by-side comparison of 4 different tillage systems that include conventional till with moldboard plow, conventional till with chisel, a strip till, and no-till. It was a continuous corn production system under furrow irrigation. We started this project in 2018 and finished 3 years of the research, and we evaluated crop yield and yield components, soil physical, chemical, and biological properties. We conducted economic analysis to see which tillage system is more profitable, and also we evaluated environmental impacts of these tillage systems by conducting life cycle assessment analysis. So some of the results of this study, as you can see in 2018, the highest yield was obtained from moldboard plow and no-till, but chisel and strip till produced the lowest yield. We saw this pretty similar results in 2019 and 2020. When we put together all the data of these 3 years, the average data, we can see the highest yield was produced by moldboard plow. Yield from no-till was not significantly different from that one, but chisel and strip till produced significantly lower yield compared to the other two. So, but we were interested to look at that to see why this yield difference is observed. So as you know, so corn yield is determined by how many plants you have per acre and how much grain is produced by every single plant. And the weight of grain produced by plants is determined by the basically size of your ear, the number of kernels row per ear and number of kernels per row, as well as average kernel weight. So we saw that no, tillage didn't have any effect on the number of kernels row and also number of actually kernels per row, but seed weight or kernel weight was affected, and chisel and strip till resulted in lower grain weight per plant. So we also look at the plant population because it's another important factor determining corn yield, and we observed although the difference was not statistically significant, but we had about 6% lower plant population in no-till compared to moldboard plow. When we put together this information, we can find two important findings. First, plant population was 6% lower under no-till compared to moldboard plowing, but grain yield per plant, means how much grain was produced by every single plant, was much higher in no-till compared to moldboard plowing. So this shows that although the yield difference was not statistically significant between moldboard plow and no-till, but we saw about 6% lower yield in no-till, which was, we also saw 6% lower plant population in no-till, but every single plant produced 3% more grain compared to moldboard plow. So we can assume that if we can get the same plant population in no-till, the same as what we have in moldboard plow, we probably can see higher yield in no-till compared to moldboard plow. And there are some management systems, there are some management decisions that can help us to reach to that goal, such as doing a better residue management or increasing seeding rate, and also better setup of no-till planter to make sure that the seeds are placed at the optimum depths when we are doing no-till. So in this study, we also look at some physical, chemical, and biological properties. This picture is showing penetration resistance or also compaction, which we measured using this device. This device can automatically measure soil compaction in each layer of soil and then record it. So by looking at this picture, you can see in the top layer of the soil, probably 0 to 6 inch, no-till was more compacted than the other three tillage systems. When we go deeper, actually, moldboard plow is still less compacted compared to the other one, which is shown with this black line. But if we go a little bit more deeper, then no significant difference was seen between the tillage system in terms of soil compaction. This layer actually is our plow layer, 0 to 30 centimeter, which is about 12 inch. So, but below that, we didn't see any compaction. And no matter what, our compaction never exceed 1.4. So this is not a compaction that can prevent root growth. So we didn't see any major problem with compaction in any of these tillage systems. Saturated hydraulic conductivity is another important physical properties of the soil, is also infiltration rate. The higher infiltration rate you have means that in case of you have a heavy rainfall, so there is a less chance for erosion and runoff. So as you can see here, no-till has a little bit lower infiltration rate because, as we mentioned, the top layer of the soil in no-till was a little bit more compacted than the other three tillage systems. Available water holding capacity, which is extremely important for actually crop production, especially in semi-arid areas and also in dryland systems. We wanted our soil to be able to hold more water. So as you can see, when we shift from multiple plow to other tillage systems, we observed significant increase in water holding capacity. Water stable aggregate is also another important physical characteristic of the soil because, first of all, it shows that how your soil aggregate are stable in case of rainfall or a storm, and also they can protect soil organic carbon from quick decomposition. So as you can see, we are seeing improvement in water stable aggregate in soil when we are doing no-till and strip till. And this table is showing the effect of the tillage on soil chemical properties. No significant effect on soil pH and soil EC was observed. Total organic carbon was not changed. As we expect, any changes in soil organic carbon takes time. So it's not something that quickly changed due to changing in the management practices. But we saw an increasing trend in POXY. POXY, or permanganate oxidizable carbon, is active carbon in the soil and actually is very sensitive to the management. So as you can see, POXY increased from 550 to 617 milligram per kilogram, which is show that carbon sequestration is happening at higher rate under no-till. So if we continue this practice for another 5 or 6 years, we're probably gonna see higher organic carbon and organic matter in our soil because it shows that carbon sequestration is happening at higher speed. So the economic analysis I was talking about, so we put all the inputs and also tillage costs here. The cost for land and insurance is not included. So production cost using multiple plow was $639 an acre. And for no-till, it was $584. So no-till was $55 an acre cheaper. For the economic return, as you can see, net income from multiple plow was $555, which was $21 per acre more than no-till. So the grain price was considered at $3.52 and stover price was considered at $82. This economic analysis actually include both grain and stover that is baled and harvested. So in the study number 2, as I mentioned, so in this study we compared how residue management interact with tillage. So we had 3 residue management systems, including residue grazing, residue baling, and the system that we left the residue so it was not removed from the field, and then 2 tillage systems, multiple plow and no-till. So again, under furrow irrigation, continuous corn. So 3 years data show that effective residue management was significant and effective tillage was also significant. But effective residue by tillage, the interaction of residue by tillage was not significant, showing that how residue management affected corn yield was not dependent on the type of tillage. So we saw the same result in no-till and multiple plow. So some of the results in this study, actually in this 3 years of study, we saw much higher yield under no-till compared to conventional tillage. As you can see here, on all 3 years, we saw pretty much higher yield, and average over 3 years, the yield in multiple plow was 181 bushel per acre compared to 209 bushel per acre for no-till corn. And the reason why, because we did a better job in this study, and we could get the same plant population in no-till compared to conventional tillage. The only case was in 2019 in which our plant population was lower in no-till, and actually in that year we also saw that no-till yielded the same as conventional till. In the other 2 years, we saw higher yield in, we saw the good stand establishment in no-till, so we saw also the good yield, higher yield of no-till compared to conventional till. Because like the previous study, grain yield per plant was always higher in no-till compared to conventional till. So what about residue management? Effect of residue management is showing in this picture. We observed that in all 3 years, the highest yields was obtained from treatment in which residue was baled, followed by grazing. These two treatments in which residue was removed from the field resulted in significantly higher corn yield. What about soil health? So in this study, actually, we measured different soil physical, chemical, and biological properties, and then we used them. We gave them a score using soil management assessment framework in order to evaluate how these management practices are affecting soil health overall. So the most important things in this table is how these residue management and tillage affected soil organic carbon. As you can see here, the effect was not significant. The effect of residue management was not significant, although we are seeing that soil organic carbon reduced from 1.55 to 1.50 when we have the residue baling. Tillage, on the other hand, also caused a little bit increase in soil organic carbon when we compare conventional till to no-till. And microbial biomass carbon the same. So the overall soil health is shown here, residue management. So when we leave the residue in the field, the soil health score was 0.82, whereas it reduced to 0.79 in residue baling treatment. So it's showing us, although the baling might be very profitable because we saw much higher yield from corn, and also we can sell that residue as an additional product, but it may cause our soil health to decline over time. This is only happen after 3 years. So if we continue this for another 5 or 6 years, this decline maybe even bigger and more apparent. So this the first part is for 0 to 6 depths, and then the bottom panel is for 6 to 12 inch depths. So some conclusion from these studies. So in study number 1, yield difference between multiple plow and no-till was not statistically significant, although yield in no-till was 6% lower, but it was not significant. In study 2, no-till yielded 28 bushel per acre more than multiple plow. We find that no-till success greatly depends on stand establishment. So any management practices that can minimize seed and seedling mortality can actually can play important role in actually implementing no-till successfully. Production costs using no-till was $55 an acre less compared to multiple plow. 3 years after shifting from conventional till to no-till, we observed improvement in soil health indicators. Residue removal via baling or grazing significantly increased corn yield and economic return regardless of tillage type. However, when we bale the residue year after year in continuous corn production system, we saw a decline in soil organic carbon and microbial biomass carbon, as well as soil health. Therefore, in case that the farmers are baling residue continuously, they should pay close attention to soil organic carbon stock. Having a more diverse rotation and also probably removing the residue at lower rate, like 50%, 60%, would be probably helpful to overcome this problem. Thanks to Colorado Corn for providing funding for these projects, and thanks to the people who help us to do this trial. And I'd be happy to take your questions if you have any. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Keshavarz. That was a great presentation. I know I learned a lot, and it really took me back to my time when I was at Colorado State University. I'll kick things off with a question that I noticed is, you talked about the removal of residue for your experiment, and wondering, did you see a change in your nutrient needs, like your potassium and phos, in the next years through soil sampling, so that you can make that back up rather than have what is in the corn plants residual staying in the field and breaking down?
Actually, that was one of the research questions we had. We also quantified a nutrient uptake by the plants and quantified how much nutrient are removed by the plants, because we only continued this for 3 years. As you can see in this table, we don't see major decline in soil phosphorus or potassium yet. But yes, absolutely, if we continue this for longer term, because these nutrients are not going back to the soil, so basically we end up using heavier fertilizer down the road. But we are not still at that point, because we only had done this trial for 3 years.
Interesting. And to tag on to that, would you expect to see that detrimental to the economics of this, depending upon what fertilizer prices are versus what you can get for your stover, or does it balance out in the wash?
Exactly, because if you see decline in your soil phosphorus or potassium, because you're removing those extra, and then down the road, instead of applying, for example, 100 pounds of potash every year, you end up applying 150, and then you have to add the cost of that fertilizer to your economic evaluation. Yes, if we see that decline, that additional fertilizer that needs to be applied to replenish this would be a cost. So we have to add that to our economic analysis. Yes, that's absolutely true.
Just a reminder that if anybody has any questions, they can open up the Q&A box or the chat, or raise their hand, and we'll get you linked up so you can ask some questions. Jeremy, do you have any questions on this study?
Yeah, I guess a comment and then a question. So I guess as I have a little bit of experience with flood irrigation, and as a young farmer, I perhaps didn't think residue management through completely, and noticed pretty fast that stubble will float and move when it is under flood irrigation. So that was an eye-opener that made me think a little bit differently. But do you have any plans for repeating this type of study with pivot irrigation in the future? I know out in eastern Colorado, there's a lot more pivot irrigation compared to what they see up there closer to the Front Range. And I think a lot of farmers out here are somewhat hesitant to switch to no-till completely. Granted, you know, they do rotations and stuff, but they haven't moved to a completely no-till system. Do you have any plans to take a look at this?
Yeah, in Western Colorado, we don't have many sprinkler irrigation system and pivots. I would say maybe I have some, maybe 1 or 2. So there's not really many. We are planning to have a sprinkler irrigation built on the research center. So if that's built, yeah, we can do some trial under a sprinkler irrigation as well. But the only reason we did this study was because there's not many research done on no-till under furrow irrigation. And as I show, we have done this trial for 3 years and we didn't have major problem with irrigation. So, and the next step would be doing more extension, doing some demonstration trials on farmers' fields, having field days and show the people the benefits they can get, economic benefits and also soil health benefits. So hopefully encourage them to start trying it at least in the part of their fields and see if it works, then expand it.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Just so everybody knows, there is another poll question up. It's a multiple choice question where you can answer in multiple places. So please take a little bit of time to answer that one. It's related to this soil health and conservation practices. One quick question from this end is, there's a lot of talk going on at the federal level about carbon sequestration and carbon payments for farmers. Are you seeing any indication that doing something like switching over to no-till could have an adequate amount of carbon sequestration for our farmers to possibly realize the benefits if a carbon market were to come into place?
Yes, I think so. At least, but we need to be careful because changes in soil organic carbon takes really time. It's not like you do 1 year no-till or 2 year no-till and see your organic matter increase from 1% to 2%. Any changes happen really slowly. As you can see here in this table, so soil organic carbon after 3 years increased from 1.52 to 1.56. So we are seeing a little bit slight increase in soil organic carbon. And actually no-till is a practice that eligible for getting those carbon credits and premium. Yeah, absolutely, that's the case.
That's good to hear, as you know, that would be another possible avenue of revenue for our farmers as we really look towards the agricultural sector being a solution to the climate issues that are being brought forward today, rather than a contributor. So that's really good news to hear, Doctor. I don't see any other questions. Jeremy, do you have any others?
No, I don't. Thank you, Dr. Keshavarz.
Thank you for having me, and it was great. It was a great meeting. Thanks, Nick.
Hey, thank you so much for being here. Greatly appreciate your time.
Sure.
We will now move to our last presenter of the day, and that is Dr. Chad Godsey. He was born and raised on a farm and ranch near Ray in northeastern Colorado. After graduation with a Ph.D. in 2005 from Kansas State University, he went to work at Oklahoma State University as a cropping system plant and soil sciences. He served as the state specialist for most of the oil seeds produced in the state. Most of his research and extension efforts were focused on increasing the efficiency of crop production through uses of technology, no-tillage, and crop rotation. In 2013, he started Godsey Precision Ag in an effort to help producers better utilize precision ag technologies in the Great Plains and to increase their profitability. Thank you so much, Dr. Godsey, for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing your presentation.
All right. Is my sound okay?
I think I can hear it over my screaming children, so you're good.
All right. All right. Let me try to see my slide. Okay.
We're on the preview section of it instead of the actual view section.
Let me. Is that better?
Yes.
All right. Yep. All right. Well, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present some of our research from last year. Obviously, 2020 was challenging from a lot of aspects. Corn research in Eastern Colorado was no different, obviously for different reasons. But want to spend a little bit of time today talking about some of the research we did last year with specifically potassium recommendations. Go into a little bit of background here. Obviously, everybody knows that potassium is essential macronutrient for corn production and all plant production for that fact. Really, the thing that's brought potassium, I guess, to light, I think all over the place, but especially in eastern Colorado, western Kansas, western Nebraska, is the growing seasons we've had the last couple of years. We've had a lot of late season lodging issues, which some of that's been potentially blamed on potassium deficiencies late in the season. Obviously, we've had weather events that have influenced that as well. Looking through, it's kind of funny how fast you forget things. Looking through some of our field location pictures the last couple of days, looking for some of the potassium research. I came across a couple, late August pictures, and I forgot how smoky it was for the late July and most of August, and that's what that picture's reflecting there. But not get sidetracked a little bit here, but so that's really the last 2 years is really what has brought potassium to the forefront as far as something that I think we needed to reevaluate. A lot of the potassium research, the calibration correlation work was done 20, 30 and even 20, 30 years ago and even longer potentially. So always good to revisit some of those basic fertility calibrations. A little bit of background. Currently, CSU and K-State, for that fact, use 120 part per million, basically critical level for crop sufficiency. So basically, this is saying if your soil test K is 120 parts per million, you're very unlikely to see a crop response or yield response to additional potassium fertilizer. A lot of our sands, our valent sands out in eastern Colorado, in Yuma County specifically, can easily be below that 120 parts per million. So this is something that we take review closely every year with soil samples that we collect. And this data here is showing some of the variation and recommendations that you get from various labs. This was a quick study that we did probably 3 or 4 years ago. We basically collected one soil sample from a field and split it in seven different soil sample bags, mixed it thoroughly, and sent it off to 7 different labs. Just want to point out, there obviously was variation in potassium soil test levels, which was concerning a little bit. Potassium soil tests will vary, easily 10 to 15 part per million, between runs. So most of these were pretty close to the average. But the thing I want to highlight here is the potassium recommendations. Obviously, CSU, K-State follow a crop sufficiency. So they're basically fertilizing that crop for that given year. A lot of the other labs will either have a combination of crop sufficiency plus a build and maintain, or just a flat out build and maintain level. Midwest Labs historically has given a build recommendation. So, and I believe it's based on a 4 to 6 year build time frame. So obviously you can see from a producer standpoint, it's kind of concerning. Depending on what lab you send your results to, you're going to have a $6 to $58 per acre difference in potassium recommendation. So which one's right? That's kind of what we wanted to verify, and also identify, if that critical level is sufficient with higher yielding hybrids that we have now, or if it's something that we need to revisit. Two objectives of this study. First one, obviously, determine grain yield response to changes in K soil test levels. So obviously, grain yield is what matters to farmers, to you guys. So that was our number one objective. And then second of all, kind of as a side, almost as a side note, determine if K fertilizer increases late season plant standability. There was some pioneer research done in the early 2000s. I think most of it was conducted in Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri geography. That showed some late potassium applications reduced lodging in certain hybrids. So that's something else that we wanted to try to evaluate last year in 2020. A little bit about the methodology that we used. So we kind of used, I guess some might call it non-traditional ways to evaluate this. We wanted to include as many locations as we did, and I've kind of changed my philosophy in going from some small plot research to bigger, larger plots, and tried to, I guess you could say, embrace the variability that we have in all of our fields, whether it be potassium or phosphorus or what. So we wanted to identify as many locations and work with as many producers as we could. And one of the ways that we were able to do this, obviously, is with creating prescriptions and utilizing producers' equipment, and then also commercial applicators, which I'll get into a little bit later on the next slide. But our locations consisted of 8 what I call coarse textured fields in eastern Colorado, mainly in Yuma and Sedgwick County. And what I classify as coarse textured or sandy soils are CECs of less than 10. In most instances, these fields had were less than 5 mill equivalents per 100 grams of soil. So very, very sandy, valent, Haxton, sandy loam soils. Soil test K ranged in these fields from 92 to 180 parts per million. One of these locations we did not harvest. We harvested it, but it was significantly affected by hail, so we did not report the results here. 2 locations we had in heavier textured soils with CECs above 10. The reason why we included these is that over the last 5 or 10 years, there's been a lot of thought that even in our higher soil test soils, our clay soils or silt loam soils, that potassium is tied up and not readily available for plant uptake. And so that's why we included these locations. Unfortunately, both of these locations were lost to hail. They were south of Ray, and just we were able to harvest the field, but yields were 150 bushels, and so we just didn't feel confident using any of the data from there. Plot size, like I mentioned, are larger. They were replicated 3 times, but plot size was greater than a half an acre in all instances. And then grain yield was collected with calibrated yield monitors. So some of the treatments that we evaluated, we set out the main emphasis, or the main treatments we wanted to look at was the 0060. Traditionally out here, that is where, when you have low soil test K soils and it needs a fair amount of potassium, it will be dry, or 0060 will be dry spread. That design was randomized complete block design, which I'll show you here in a little bit. 0 to 300 pounds of actual product per acre. And then we also had one location that was a strip till, 0012, applied at strip till, and there we either had a 0 or 40 gallon treatment. We were not able to collect, we collected yield data from that site, but we had a calibration error. So I actually am still in the process of cleaning that up based on scale tickets when that farmer gets those to me. So the third trial or component of the research this summer was We used an agri-liquid potassium product, and it actually was Sure-K is what we used. Not to promote any certain products. That was just one we had available. There's a lot of similar products on the market that able to put through the pivot and just to be able to put some late season potash on. Those obviously going through the pivot, we had to be creative. And so there we did what I call replicated sectors, in that we would apply 10 to 15 degrees and then turn that product off, turn the injector off for 10 or 15 degrees, and then replicate that as the sprinkler went around. That was applied at either 0 or 2 gallons per acre rate. Just to kind of, before we get into the results, the 2020 growing season, obviously we talked about it a little bit. Heat in early June, and then September 9th, pretty much all of Eastern Colorado realized this or had this happen, but all of our locations had anywhere from 2 to 6 inches of snow on September 8th, 9th time frame. And we did have freezing temperatures. However, the plants were not entirely killed with that freeze, but it did impact yield from September, or for the rest of September. So you'll notice when we look at our results, our top end yields really were not there, which we noticed across the region. And whether it was a combination of heat in June and the early freeze and snow, it's to be debated, but definitely environment had an impact. This is just an example of our typical layouts. So the map you're seeing in the background is historic yield potential. So basically, we wanted to place these plots in different areas of the field. So the black and blue region is a historically above averaging portion of that field. So in this instance, in this location, we have a set of plots in the higher yielding areas of the field, and then we have a set of plots in the lower yielding areas of the field. So these plots were laid out to match guidance lines of applicating equipment, and then also they were width was designed to match that application of the width of the applicators. So this is a first set of results. We really, I'll kind of spoil it early for everybody. We really did have a lack of general response from K applications, which is not necessarily bad by any means. But so is what we did for our analysis. We did obviously analyze each individual plot by itself for each location and each location within the field. But for the presentation today, I'm combining these the locations overall, just because the lack of response from the K fertilizer. So basically, these next two graphs explain this a little bit. Normalized yield is on the left or y-axis. So each field was normalized compared to the plot average. So if it was 102%, that treatment would have been 2% above the plot, the entire plot average, if that makes sense. And on the x-axis is a treatment, the pounds of 0.60 that was applied per acre. Obviously, there's no significant difference among treatments across all locations. And this is representing the locations that were 150 parts per million or lower as far as soil test potassium goes. So even when we pull out the couple locations that were 120 parts per million or lower, there was still not a significant potassium response at those locations in 2020. So here is the locations that were above 150 parts per million of soil test K. Once again, no significant differences. We did have some variability, but really nothing over plus or minus 1 to 2%, which essentially for 230 bushel corn or 220 bushel corn is 3 to 4 bushels. So it's relatively hard to detect a difference with that minimal of response. So once again, those soil test K levels over 150 parts per million, no significant response to K fertilizer. So as far as the results from those 0060 trials or locations, one thing I do want to point out is that we really did not have any top end yield in any of those environments. So historically, if you recall the map, that black to blue historical yielding region, typically that would be 250 bushels plus in that region. And then some of the poorer areas would be 180 to 220 yield range. So in 2020, really those higher yielding regions were 220 to 250 bushels. So we did not have any top end yield with the environment that was provided this year or last year in 2020. So I'm skeptical to say with confidence that, we definitely we're planning on repeating these studies plus an additional a few more in 2021. But with what we saw in 2020 with the yield levels we saw, we did not see any additional potassium response. And we did only have 3 locations under that 120 part per million. Really, if you look hard enough, you can find some fields that are in that 80 to 100, but really a lot of our fields are right around that 120 parts per million critical level. So definitely influenced what we saw. Once again, no consistent response in the 0060. Then the second objective, if you recall, was trying to identify differences in lodging and the overall impact of lodging from especially later applied potassium. In regards to the 0060 trials, we did not see any significant differences in lodging. However, we really, most of our locations were harvested timely, at 16% or above moisture. So we did not have any significant lodging in any of the fields. And part of that, we didn't have any wind events until later in the season as well. So, but no different observations in lodging. The SureK pivot trial, the one location that we had, and this was kind of an attempt to verify, if late season potassium through the pivot would help mainly in lodging. We necessarily weren't thinking that we would see a yield response, and it wasn't as significant. It was not a significant yield increase. Numerically, we did increase with that SureK 2.2 bushels, but we did not have a significant, statistically significant increase. So this is how it was applied. We basically, like I said, broke it up into sectors. Here we had three replications just based on the amount of product available to us. It is challenging evaluating stuff through the pivot, but with the newer irrigation panels, it does make it easier. We know those pumps are turning on and off at the correct degrees. So SureK, this is something that we want to repeat definitely in 2021 and add locations. And then obviously we don't wish for any wind events late in the season, but a challenging fall to see if we can increase standability. So one of the things that I haven't talked much about is tissue sampling. We did a fair amount of tissue sampling within the fields. We had plots in, as well as just scattered fields throughout our region that we actively scout in and work in. This is actually, the tissue samples shown here are off of that pivot trial I just showed you. The things I have highlighted here, and this would have been taken 10 days after application. So we did have a increase in potassium from where that Sure-K was applied. So it's one thing to apply potassium and even dry spread potash. It's one thing to apply it, but it's another thing to get it into the plant from my observation over the years. So it was encouraging that we did increase, and this is an average of three tissue samples pulled from that field. The other thing I have highlighted here is boron, and this is, I don't want to change the focus of the presentation, but this was just an interesting finding. Sure-K, we had no anticipation of it affecting boron levels in the plant, but we did see a fairly, on two out of the three samples, we saw a fairly high increase in boron. So we don't know if that's random, something that we're going to look at next year and pay a little closer attention to. It's one of those things we don't know if it was a side effect of the Sure-K or what. We would have not expected that. So we definitely will continue to watch that. Just some of the other observations, and these were not replicated, but these are going to guide our future, I guess, research studies in 2021. The side dress, we had several fields where side dress was applied anywhere from 20 to 25 gallons. And that product was 26033. The one thing that we did notice a week following that side dress application, our tissue potassium concentrations where we had tissue samples spiked drastically when that 26033 was applied. So this might be an alternative for dry spreading that 0060 preseason. We may get just as big a bang for our buck with the 26033, and then and as well be able to apply less pounds of total K. So that was really encouraging, and that was very consistent across the fields that we sampled. Another observation we had was we had a couple Sure-K trials out where we applied that in furrow. I've always been not a huge proponent of K in starter fertilizers, just because we can't get that many pounds of K in that starter fertilizer. But what we saw in June in some of these trials was that we had a lot better heat and tolerance, heat and water stress tolerance on those trials where we had some Sure-K in furrow. Now you probably could use a lot of other products and get that similar response. So my thinking is this probably showed up in 2020 because of how warm and how warm and windy we were, in early June when those plants didn't have a lot of root mass under them yet. But it showed up clearer than day. This image on the right is actually showing, and this was even in late June, early July, even as late as then, we could see some difference. And that's what the kind of the streaking is, especially top portion of the picture in the green area. You can see the darker green areas. That's a thermal image showing some differences in how those plants are responding. So obviously we had some more potassium in those plants, and we're really able to regulate water use and regulate stress a little bit better. So kind of to wrap up, and I would be happy to answer any questions or go into more in depth in any of the trials you want to talk about. But really 2020, as those results indicate, critical levels really appear to be correct. I will put one caveat on there. We do want to repeat these in 2021 in hopes of capturing those higher yielding environments. That's the one thing. Like I said, we didn't have very many of our plot locations that were above 250 bushels. So the third thing, I still do think there's room for improvement in potassium management. And what I mean by that is, I think we need to start looking at some of these fertilizers that are a little bit more efficient, as well as timing. When you look at a potassium uptake curve, it's very similar to the nitrogen uptake curve. And so I think that may be one of the issues we have with, dry spread early or preseason is, how much of that K is going to be available when that plant needs it. So that's some of the things that we want to, as we move forward in the future here, is evaluate some of those. If we clearly think that our critical level is correct for corn production, then we just need to try to figure out how to increase that efficiency. So, want to definitely thank Colorado Corn for the support of this, and over the last several years, you guys have been very supportive of some of the research that we've done out here, and I can't thank you enough. And very, very much appreciated. And we really try to take ideas that farmers give us, and some of our clients have issues with, or we see struggles with, and try to help them improve that. So appreciate it. And Nick, I'll turn it back over to you. And I guess feel free to answer any questions or comments.
Yes, thank you so much, Chad. That was a great presentation, and thank you for going over all of that with us. I'm happy to have helped fund that research, and hopefully we can keep partnering in the future as you explore this opportunity. I'll go ahead and quickly share the poll results from our last question that we asked, and it does look like we have a lot of farmers implementing some type of conservation tillage practices on their operation. So that's very encouraging, especially as we look towards more emphasis being put on carbon sequestration and the practices that will allow that to happen. So thank you all for sharing. I greatly appreciate that. I will issue a last poll in the next few minutes. But one thing I was going to ask is, you showed that picture of the sun and the haze and the smoke. How much impact do you think that had on the ability for plants to photosynthesize this summer, with so much of that sunlight being blocked out, combined with how hot and dry it was?
Yeah, no, excellent question. And we've really been, ever since late August, and we knew we were going to have issues or potential issues with that, or some of the things that happened. We really have been looking at that and looking at past historic data. Anything, looking back at past historic data with solar radiation, and solar radiation is really the driving force for when we have, and I say we as in Colorado, have higher than average, or well above average corn yields. It comes from solar radiation in most cases. And if you look at our historic trends, there was certain days, we were 40% below, but on average we were anywhere from 15 to 20% below our what we would call average solar radiation. From about the worst period there was probably August 15th to August 25th, I think it was. So definitely had an impact. And the heat in June and July, obviously I think impacted certain areas more than others. I think for most of us out here, where we had, our wells were good and able to keep up. The heat, I don't think hurt us, because we had and I base that on the kernel count. We had our kernel count at middle of August, the end of August, to have well above average yields. So we had the kernel count there, but we just didn't finish good, which I think is a combination of the smoke and the early freeze. So long answer for a short question. I apologize.
No worries. I'm going to issue our last poll. Jeremy, do you have one last question for Dr. Godsey before we go?
Yeah, I guess just a comment. I guess, boy, farming in eastern Colorado, we got it all between heat, hail, smoke, snow, you name it, we got it. So I guess I forgot about that snow we had on the 9th of September. So 2020 was just quite a year all around. But I hope, next year that you're able to, or this upcoming year, that you're able to get harvestable results, and that, the studies come out a little bit cleaner without so much interference from Mother Nature. But I am interested to see the boron kind of relationship that it has with K, and then also the heat stress. Those are two things that, may not have been the target of the study, but it's interesting to find these things as we do these research projects. So thank you, Chad.
Yep. Thank you. Yeah, no, I agree. I think those, we definitely learned a little bit, and we need these years. You learn from every year, but it's often is those side things that we learn that end up having the biggest impact. So, yep. Appreciate it.
So while I talk, if anybody does want to issue a question in the question and answer chat, feel free. Also, Brad, you asked a question earlier to Dr. Brent Young on the report. I've stuck an answer from him in there if you'd like to take a chance to read it. That'll give you kind of his take on things. Soybeans look to be leading the pack with corn to follow, so that might be good news for us. But I'd like to thank Dr. Chad Godsey and Dr. Reza Keshavarz for coming in, presenting, and for doing all the work that helps find information and does the research that can help make things better for our producers as they go forth and try and find ways to become more efficient and productive and profitable on their operations. And so thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. We greatly appreciate the time that you spent with all the work you did on your research, and for being willing to jump on and present today to our producers. So thank you so much. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Jeremy. Just remember, one last poll question out there for you to fill out. Don't be shy. Let us know what you thought about today's webinar, our spring forum, and we'll be looking to hopefully do this in the future. So Jeremy, with that, some wrap-up comments from you.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I know that it's a busy time of the year, and as the weather gets warmer, you're all itching to get back out in the field. I know I've got some farming to go finish up today after the meeting, but again, thank you. And I just want to say thanks to Nick for putting this on. It's something that we haven't done in the past, but we're looking forward to doing in the future. And I want to say again about the survey that we have out. If you could log on to our website, coloradocorn.com, and fill out the survey, we would really appreciate your responses. We will use these responses in formulating our new strategic plan over the next few months. And I'd also invite you to take a look at the annual report that Nick posted in the chat, and take a look, see what districts you're in. We have some open spots available on the board. If you're interested to join, we'd really love to fill these spots and get active participants on the board that are willing to bring their insights and their passion for corn farming and farming in the state of Colorado in general. So take a look at that, and just want to say thank you for doing what you do. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for your checkoff dollars. I know it's a hard thing to do, and corn prices are in the tank, and profitability is not what you want to see. But with checkoffs, we can do collectively what we can't do individually, and we strive every day to leverage those dollars that you are gracious enough to provide to us to really hopefully make a difference in your lives and in your communities by promoting, demand and trade and research projects like we saw today to help you figure out which practices are best and which is more economical compared to another. And that's really our number one goal. And then outreach. I mean, you've seen over the news the last couple of weeks, we've got some battles to fight here in Colorado. So we'll do our best to make sure that we're at the table to have these important conversations and that your voices are heard. So thank you again. That'll do it, Nick. Pass it back to you.
That's it for today. Thank you all for joining us. We really do appreciate your time and for jumping on. Have a great one and stay safe out there.